Funding for the production of Public Square provided by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, working to improve the lives of vulnerable children.
This program is part of American Graduate. Let's make it happen. A public media initiative made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
We have no idea how many other 56,000 kids between 0 and 3.
And we're the poorest in the nation.
Funded by Medicaid, 56,000 kids right now who need some form of early childhood and support for learning. How is that going to happen?
Yeah, we balanced the budget over the last few years, but we balanced the budget on the backs of our kids. That's how we ended up 50th.
I don't think any of us are satisfied with being at the bottom of that list.
It's not that our kids are failing, it's that we failed our kids.
And a very important poll, I keep going back to this, is the land-grant fund. 66% of the people want us to go down this road. We love our democracy. Why not just let them vote?
We're not satisfied. We don't think the work is done, but continuing to make targeted investments and really make sure we're targeting the kids most in need and programs that are ready to be successful, I think is the key to success in the long run.
This is the most important issue facing the state, what's happening to our kids, and we're taking a very incremental, slow, futile approach to what's needed. And I think, we're condemning ourselves to failure by this.
We need a vision.
Welcome to Public Square, where civic dialogue takes center stage. Tonight, we premiere our new season with one of the most discussed and perhaps important topics for New Mexicans. How do we improve child well-being?
The unmet need is $277 million.
Last year, New Mexico ranked last in the nation on this measurement, according to the Kids Count survey. This year, we inched up to 49th. A growing body of research indicates that early interventions in a child's life can make a big difference in improving those numbers. The push to expand early childhood education and services has garnered widespread support in New Mexico. Many lawmakers are on board as well, but there are serious disagreements over how much to invest and where to find that money.
The people who oppose tapping the land-grant permanent fund don't oppose spending money on kids. I think that's a really...
But they're opposing the solution.
They're opposing your solution.
What solution?
They're opposing your solution.
There's many solutions. There's many, but there's only one that's going to give us the money that we need to get this done. We can't nickel and dime this anymore, folks.
We are fortunate to bring together a remarkable group for a very candid and solution-oriented discussion to this very complex problem. We'll hear from a family in need, advocates, and experts in early childhood. Then we'll bring in three lawmakers, Senator Sue Wilson Beffert, Jerry Ortiz-Pino, and John Sapien, as well as the deputy secretaries of the Children, Youth, and Families Department and the Public Education Department. Before we get started, here's more information on our topic. From age 0 to 3, children's brains create as many as 700 neural connections per second. But too many adverse experiences can short-circuit that process and change brain architecture. As these adverse experiences multiply, the odds for developmental delay and poor physical and emotional health increase.
What's up?
Look up.
And studies indicate that kids who are behind at age 3 tend to stay behind, regardless of their education.
What are you doing?
Research shows that investing early reaps significant benefits later.
Times 1 is 2.
Like better reading scores, fewer teen pregnancies, and higher graduation rates. The rate of return on early childhood investments, according to a number of economists, ranges from $8 to $16 for every dollar spent. After cuts in 2011, New Mexico has steadily increased spending on prenatal care, home visiting, and pre-kindergarten, but there are still many children who are not getting these services. Advocates say the time is now to do more, and we must prioritize our children's well-being. One possible solution is to draw more funds from the state's land-grant permanent fund, which could bring $150 million more in the first year. That move would require legislators to pass a constitutional amendment, and voters would have to approve it. A recent poll found widespread support for the idea. But critics say taking a larger chunk of the fund could could slow its growth and hurt future payments to the state's education system. They also argue existing funds need to be targeted to those most at risk in order to get the biggest benefit. Yet in light of our continued low rankings, we still have much to do to improve the well-being of our children. What should be the next steps?
Our child well-being, all the indicators are near dead last in the nation. That should be an outrage.
And right now I don't have that much confidence in the state of New Mexico, which makes me very sad because I really want to stay in this state, but as it is right now, we're actually considering moving for our boys.
I work in a part of town that has high poverty rates, and so we see a lot of the impacts of that poverty on our kids. You know, presenting with a sore throat, it's never just a sore throat. It can be, you know, and by the way, did you run out of food this month, and are you getting evicted?
I would love to see us come out with some real solutions, with some real political will to move New Mexico's kids and families forward and make a commitment to find the funding that will make a real difference.
The future looks grim if we do not make the systemic change we need to make now.
Thank you all for being here on Public Square, our first show of the new season. Sophia, I would like to start with you because you are a new mom with twins. You're getting home visiting services through St. Joseph Community Health. Why did you seek out those services? How have they helped you?
It's pretty crazy being a mother of twins. You tend to try to just survive the day. You feed babies, you change babies, you soothe babies, you put babies to sleep, and you forget about their development. You forget, oh, did I teach my baby today? Did I look for developmental cues of my baby today? St. Joseph's comes in every week and they keep me on task with the development of my children. They teach me different cues for crawling, for speaking, for grabbing toys, just everything that's crucially important for the development of these beautiful babies. And without them, I think I might not be the best that I could be as a mom.
What was it like right after you had your children?
It was very hard. I suffered postpartum depression. I also had premature babies. They were born a month early, so I was very concerned about their well-being, their weight in particular. But I was also very scared about them sleeping and not waking up, SIDS, and how I was going to cope when my husband went back to work. So St. Joseph's really came in and they reassured me and they made me not worry so much. They had their nurses come in and evaluate me for postpartum depression, gave me the education that I needed to get rid of that postpartum depression. They also helped me with the boys, teaching them how to sleep. And therefore I got more sleep, you know. They really helped me be a better mom in those first few months, which was very important.
Alan, your organization runs the home visiting program that Sophia is using. Why is early intervention like this key to impacting what happens to these children by, say, third grade?
Our state has an epidemic of toxic stress. These adverse childhood experiences are delaying our children. Our children are arriving at kindergarten behind and they're staying behind, and then they can't take advantage of the investment that we make K through 12. So St. Joe's has committed its trust. It has a $95 million trust dedicated to children from 0 to 3 years old. We thought we need to put the money where our mouth is. And we advocate, but we don't take any state or government money. But this has to be a private-public partnership of everyone coming together. Our children are 50th in many, many categories. And so we came forward saying we need to address this. The greatest systemic change that we can make in our state is in this population.
You guys are doing a lot of home visiting. Erica's group is doing a lot of home visiting. CYFD is. What percentage of kids are we reaching that should be getting this?
We're really only putting a small amount, 8 million from the state into that,
Yeah.
and it's probably matched by private. So about 4% of our children are getting home visiting, you know, only 4%.
Well, we also have 2 pediatricians here who work with young children every day. Andy Shee, you run a home visiting program, a different one, and you have seen the impacts of what Alan calls toxic stress. What does it do to kids' brain development?
Areas of the brain like the hippocampus and the amygdala that form memories, that store memories, their structures are being altered by the environment around the child that creates these kinds of toxic stress issues. And without the ability as a system to address those concerns in the family and begin to make changes that improve the health of the child and family, we're unlikely to be able to create the kinds of brain structure that kids need to be able to participate in formal education and to be competitive in that education model in an economy that's driven by information.
So, Sarah, why is it so key in that first year? Because that's when most of these neural connections are being made.
Right, right. We've heard different numbers for how many neural connections are happening per second. I think the lowest ball estimate is 700 per second, up into the thousands. Those are connections that are happening, that are laying the groundwork for brain development. And we see that through the first 2 years of life. So all of the interactions that happen with the infant and her mother or any of the caregivers, the environment, those are so important for laying that strong groundwork.
Now, you both in your practices have systems where it's not just the pediatrician, you have sort of a team. You have social workers, you have behavioral health. How does that work?
Well, when they come in for that well baby check, all of the new patients are getting a questionnaire to kind of ask about some of those adverse childhood experiences, kind of get a sense of their environment, food insecurity, maternal depression, things like that. And so right away from that first contact, we're getting a sense of what are some of the issues that the family is facing that will impact their health. The way that it works in our clinic is just down the hallway. We have all of the behavioral health team. There are just as many behavioral health members of our professional staff as there are healthcare providers. We're looking at a model where we really have to take into account all of those, what we call the social determinants of health, and keep all those people near us.
Our model identifies infants and families affected by things like parental drug use during pregnancy, domestic violence, parental mental illness, and we send a team out to the home and hope the family will engage with us and then bring the children into our clinic to provide the primary medical care and then try to create a medical home for the parents at the same time. Mm-hmm. But just like in Sophia's situation, meeting families, say for babies who are born prematurely, and thinking about what are the strengths that family has and how to build the resilience that they bring to the care of their kids is almost as important as looking at the adversities. And if we can match up our efforts to address adversities and strengthen those resilience factors, then I think we've really begun to do a good job.
Erica, you have a home visiting program that's one of the largest in the state and serving a lot of rural areas. What are the challenges in rural areas, which is most of New Mexico?
Being in the rural communities does make it more difficult. Being able to access all the services you need, be able to refer families to additional supportive mechanisms. Sometimes you have to say, well, it's only 2 hours to go see that, and that's a really, really hard statement to have to make to a family that is suffering from lots of stressors and lots of missed opportunities or things that they would rather be doing or working on to make their families successful. The best thing that we can do is really become a system that supports people from all the different aspects, that we can, bring things to them as opposed to sending them to things.
Bill, I want to turn to you because Voices for Children releases the Kids Count survey every year. It shows data of child well-being. So where are the biggest gaps?
Well, the big gap is in early childhood funding. We have the models of successful services. We know those programs work. The problem is that we're funding them at a level that only a very small fraction of our children and families have access to those services.
But the state,
that's the problem.
Didn't the state boost its spending on early childhood to about $233 million?
If you're hundreds of millions of dollars short of providing the service to all the children and families who want and need those services, then the funding is inadequate.
And Megan, that's not true.
That's not?
$230 million is not true.
In what way?
Ask the doctor. What we're talking about here, early childhood, we're talking about very early. We're talking about prenatal to 5 years old. And out of that $230 million, it is a drop of that that's going to this conversation. So it's misleading to say that $230 million has been put into this. That is not true. Doctor, what would you say?
No, I'd have to agree, and especially with stricter work requirements for new families, the sort of idea that the working poor are shirking their duty and now they need to be in the workforce, the question would be to ask policymakers, what about the children? Who is going to provide the brain stimulation and the kinds of emotional and intellectual support for those young children out of the home? So making the work requirement is a policy decision that affects 2 generations. There hasn't been concomitant funding to support the kinds of intensive, high quality early intervention and child care that kids in these families will need so that they will be successful by the time they hit 3rd grade. You can't create one policy and have that solve a political problem for one group and then penalize the younger generation because there's no planning for how that support needs to be put in place.
I want to turn to Claudia, who chairs the J. Paul Taylor Task Force. And Kay Johnson recently did a huge report for the Department of Health about early childhood across the state. You and I were both at the presentation. And one of the recommendations is to follow the recommendations of the J. Paul Taylor Task Force, which is developing a complete system for preventing child abuse. Your group believes that every pregnant woman and every child should be screened for risk factors. Why?
If we can start identifying as early as possible that likelihood of child abuse, then we can connect that family with resources that would bring support, would understand better what are the strengths that that family has and what are the possible barriers they face. So we are proposing that programs like the ones that the Young Children Health Center has, where they screen early on everyone, are replicated around the state, and that right there in every primary care setting there are co-located community health workers that are trained on what resources are available in that community and can connect those families immediately to those resources. We also want to extend that referral and that identification of issues to families that are already identified by Child Protective Services as at risk of being abused.
This sounds very expensive.
I think that the well-being of children, if we are serious about it, could be expensive at the front end. It has a tremendous potential for economic development. It has a high return in investment. We need a vision. We need a vision to go that route.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, Claudia, just when we looked at our expenditures for the number of families we serve per working day to provide this kind of high intensity home visiting and early intervention services, we're spending less than $10 a day per family under our FIT funding. Now that doesn't
family infant toddler
under
funding.
Family infant toddler.
That's federal funding.
Federal,
right?
well, it's pass through money to the state, matched by some state funding, multiplied across the say 27,000 births a year in the state of New Mexico. We can begin to develop some parameters for how that kind of expenditure might go. But I certainly agree with Claudia that the kids who are being referred to CYFD under age 3 are a group of kids whose families could represent that group that needs the most intensive interaction with the various helping agencies in a way that's supportive and not punitive.
Exactly. And going back to the expenses, if we get Medicaid to pay for community health workers,
which it is now allowed under the Affordable Care Act,
exactly,
right?
under the Affordable Care Act, if a community health worker is certified, the entity that is utilizing the services of community health workers can be reimbursed for services rendered by that community health worker.
I want to turn to Haley. There seems to be growing agreement on early childhood interventions. Alan might not believe me, but everyone seems to be giving lip service to that. Where is the gap or the fault lines?
I think there is agreement, and I don't think it's lip service. And I think that where you see major disagreement is about what the funding source ought to be. And I don't think that that's the same thing as saying that there's a population of people who don't think this is important. I mean, I was recently at a convening that the Early Childhood Partnership, Catherine Freeman's group, had put together. And that was business people, that was people who are not typically part of necessarily the land grant conversation, but who are saying, let's fund this, let's figure out a way to fund it, who are talking about it, but who are talking about different funding mechanisms. And I actually think that's where a lot of the disagreement is. I don't really think it's fair to say, there's a group of people who are serious and a group of people who are paying lip service. The funding for early childhood education has increased every year, and your point is well taken that if you start too small and you double, then you're still not where you want to be. But it's hard for me to sit and say that funding going up every year is the folks in the legislature who make the budget not taking this seriously. I think they do take it seriously.
But it's not going up. We haven't even repaired what happened in 2007, 2008. We had a crash and we lost money. We had just given away $500 million on the Richardson's tax giveaway. Our income tax was cut in half. We found ourselves very short, and they cut. And we're not at the same numbers that we went into the recession. They're trying to fix some of that, but we have not. If you look at the size of the problem, it is so small of an increase. And I do say there is a group that's more serious than maybe one that's not, because you put your money where your mouth is.
New Mexico cut higher ed deeper than any state. New Mexico cut K-12 fifth deepest of any state. We cut special ed so deeply that we now have to pay back money to the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
We cut child care eligibility in half, and we have a 6-year-long waiting list
So
for
you used to be able to
care.
get subsidies to pay for child care if you made 200% of the federal poverty level.
That's
they
right.
cut that back to
They cut that back to 100%.
Now it's up to 150%.
Now it's up to 150%. And of course, the cost of child care has gone up enormously in that time. Child care for a family costs more than tuition at the University of New Mexico. We balanced the budget over the last few years, but we balanced the budget on the backs of our kids. So that's how we ended up 50th. And that's part of the frustration that many of us feel about the ranking of being last in the nation. It's not that our kids are failing, it's that we failed our kids.
Alan, your group is pushing this idea we'll get into in the next section about tapping the Land Grant Permanent Fund. Why do you think that is key?
The money does not exist unless you're going to do some huge taxes, which there's even less political will to do. The unmet need is $277 million, the unmet need. We're not going to find that anywhere else. I've looked, don't worry, I've looked to find that money. You know how tenacious I am about that. We have not found it anywhere else, and this is a place where we don't raise taxes, where the fund continues to grow because economists have shown that, and even the State Investment Council and the LFC have said, if we take 1.5% out of the fund, it will still double by 2031.
But Haley, as you've watched this, this seems to be a real sticking point.
And I'm not opposed to tapping the permanent fund. The point I would make, and the thing that I think is sort of useful to hold in our minds, is that the people who oppose tapping the land grant permanent fund don't oppose spending money on kids. Like, I think that's a really...
But they're opposing the solution.
They're
And
opposing your
66%
solution.
of the voters.
They're opposing your
Well, there's
solution.
many solutions. There's many, but there's only one that's going to give us the money that we need to get this done. We can't nickel and dime this anymore, folks. We are in a crisis.
Well, let me ask, because Erica and I were also at the presentation Kay Johnson made, the big report. We'll put it on the Public Square website to the Department of Health. She didn't touch this issue because I think she just knew politically it was a hot potato. But she told us all at the end, there are 100 things you could do before you do that.
Yeah, there were a number of things that were discussed, and I think that there are certainly some other steps and things that people are considering. Looking at some of the other systems in terms of looking at Medicaid dollars, looking at how the state entities work together.
Or don't work together.
Or don't work together, or how they could do more or less depending upon what the situation is. And I think that there are steps that we as a state need to take, and they're good steps whether this comes to fruition or not. There's still things that we need to do in order to be effective.
One last point. Kay Johnson in this report, one of her recommendations is about leadership. And she really wants the Children's Cabinet to take a leadership role in this. And I'm just curious if that's a viable leadership entity.
I don't think it really exists anymore.
Okay.
Quite honestly, I have not received notifications of meetings. I've not seen groups being pulled together to have a conversation.
And you saw that in the past.
And we saw that in the past. Diane Dennis led that effort and made a very strong effort to bring that together. To me, in pediatric medicine, the question we have to ask ourselves is, what is the point of what we're doing? And I would say that the efforts of medicine should be to optimize the learning capacity of children of all ages so that by the time they hit 18, they can complete a formal education and be competitive in a workforce internationally and contribute to an information-driven economy. That every effort that we make in terms of our request to the legislature, every building we put up, every time we educate a student or resident, the goal should be optimizing the long-term educational capacity for every individual we touch on behalf of that child and family, but also on behalf of our state and society.
Okay, well, that's a good entree to bring in our leadership folks, and we'll continue this conversation. Welcome back to the second part of Public Square, and we've added in a lot of leadership folks here, some senators, some folks from state agencies dealing with early childhood. I have two on either side of me, Senator Jerry Ortiz-Pino and Senator Sue Wilson-Befford. I'll just start with you. I think you and I have talked, and you're not necessarily convinced that universal on all of these is the way to go.
My hope is that we really target the at-risk families and the lowest socioeconomic families to assure the greatest exposure for these very valuable programs. But the high-end families and so on, I think that they should be responsible to provide for their own child care needs.
I think that it's almost impossible to tell ahead of time who's at risk. And that's one of the real issues here, is that if you don't do it universally, then there's a stigma attached. If it's something that's provided automatically to every newborn child, then we begin getting the kind of screening for things like autism, which certainly knows no class. Now, paying for it, if it were Medicaid, I mean, and it just seems to me that this is the most cost-effective way of using Medicaid dollars. 70% of our births are to Medicaid families, so that takes a big chunk of them out of the way. You know, it would be a way of covering them.
What I don't think that we would want to do is to water down services for those that really need it.
Senator Sapien, we know that there's huge cost savings.
Well, you know, it's kind of like you had me at hello. Everybody knows the value of having a robust early childhood system. I think the John Paul Taylor Task Force had a great recommendation that we do screen every child. When your families are there at the hospital, they're having the children at the hospital, how do you braid those services to the identification piece,
I wanted to get to our agency folks, but I think Haley was going to jump in.
I was just going to say in terms of the policy issues in play that I think that there's a lot of common ground, and a lot of what our common sense things that we are doing really bridge universal and very targeted. The way the home visiting system works now is it is universally available, and that's about stigma, right? It's universally available, but to Senator Beffert's point, which is that we only have so much money and there's a population of families that are fine, our recruitment strategies are targeted. It's universal but targeted. So I've just been sort of looking into one of the Parents as Teachers home visiting programs. Teen moms in the Gallup area are recruited into this particular Parents as Teachers program. Available to anybody, but who they're going out and pulling in is teen moms. And I think that bridges what you're talking about kind of nicely.
And I think the problem with what we have on the bridge is very, very narrow for the group that actually is in high risk. We have a state that 71% of the babies were born on Medicaid last year. I mean, that's a super majority of the kids need this. We got to fund the whole thing, and getting to the hospital, that's too late. The home visiting has its most success when we have them in prenatal.
The best way for a family to engage in home visiting is in a voluntary, self-selected basis. They're going to be much more interested in joining this program and actively getting information from it if it's something that they are choosing. If we encourage them to be a part of the program, they'll stay longer, they're more invested, and just like our parent here really values what's happening there. The social stigma of anything that looks like you need this because you have something wrong or there's a problem or you could be is really, really problematic and will absolutely bring people away from the table.
And that model needs money. And that model needs a lot of money.
Sophia, so you are taking advantage of St. Joseph's because you were going to have twins, and you were like, oh my God, as most of us would be. And it's not costing you anything. But why? Had you ever thought like you wanted a stranger coming into your home?
No, I didn't know that these programs even existed. And I think that that's something that needs to be considered. You know, it was luck that I happened to join Albuquerque Mother of Twins, and they came and spoke to us. I think that the majority of people that I know that are new moms don't know about any of these services.
That's where I'm saying that the healthcare situation needs to be braided better so that we're identifying, so that you knew in the hospital there are these services. That's what the point I was making. I'm not suggesting that we wait till they come in the hospital and have the baby, but you have healthcare professionals working with moms and dads, with the family, in that situation where they're getting that prenatal care. That's where I think we need to do a better job of combining forces and putting that health care and the early childhood piece together.
From day one, that moms goes to a primary care provider and says, I'm pregnant, then have a screening right there, because there is a strong connection between if the mother had a strong adverse childhood experiences, there is a likelihood that the kid is going to be impacted, is going to have stressors. So the important thing is to have a community health worker that can offer a menu of services right there, co-located at the primary care doctor.
Jennifer, you are a deputy secretary with CYFD. So it still seems like there's a ton of need not being met.
We look at early childhood services as a continuum, starting, of course, at prenatal, before the baby is born. That's where our home visiting comes into play. We know that the infrastructure has only started being built within the last 3 years. So now, as we develop the cohort, we're able to look at what works, how do we sustain that with stable funding, and then, of course, how do we expand upon it to reach, the at-risk and the high-need communities and families in the state of New Mexico, where home visiting stops for a particular family. From CYFD's perspective, we look at then, of course, the child care realm and what we do in terms of ensuring quality child care.
We still haven't restored the full subsidies that we had 5 years ago?
In fact, it's from where I sit, we absolutely have restored the subsidies. We have eliminated the waiting list up to 150% of the federal poverty line. I know a lot of the recommendations, and one of the recommendations in the Johnson report said go up to 200% of
where
the
it used to be.
Where we used to be. But what we saw in the prior administration was when in fact the subsidy increased to 200%, and it was then we ran out of money and we were absolutely forced to cut. We had to cut all the way back to 100%. And that was catastrophic on the system. We're now, again, no waiting lists up to 150%. Providers actually were cut by 4%. Governor Martinez has restored that 4%.
The reimbursement rate?
Yes, the reimbursement rate, and then of course added an additional 4%. So we are moving in the right direction towards restoring it.
But it sounds like there's
entirety.
still a need for up to 200%. It's just a matter of money.
It is a matter of money, and we're actually looking at whether or not that is a possibility in terms of just some cost-saving mechanisms that we've put into place. So it's not as if we're saying it's not an option. We are absolutely looking at what that will cost.
Problem with 200% of poverty is that taking it up, we saw we just could not make it through the recession. But for those families that are in, there's no waiting list, and they are able to increase their co-pays.
We implemented a large number of cost-saving mechanisms in the last couple of years, and we've been able to reinvest actually $26 million back into the child care realm, the program, the division. So at this point, we are not expanding. We are not asking for an expansion of that.
The legislature has committed over $100 million of new money, and it's been methodical, and it's not been a dump on the system. And so for several years, there was money that was reverted back to the budget because we just couldn't get it out the door. That means our system needs to mature and be able to handle that type of money. Of that 100 million, you're probably talking about 70 million has gone to 0 to 5 programs.
And of course, we are looking at evidence-based programs that are accountable. Just expanding it willy-nilly in terms of child care. The way it used to be, we have found that it had no effect on the entrance into K through 12. So we are very excited
But
do we have enough longitudinal data to look at that?
It's absolutely true that we did have enough data to say that childcare, as we were doing it, wasn't helping with school readiness. But one thing that was left out of that study that we at SEPA are actually going to look at that we're pretty excited about is other effects of childcare. So were low-income families able to work as a result of the childcare subsidy? That's a huge effect. That's not a school readiness effect, but it's absolutely a child well-being effect.
Even if we restored subsidies to the same levels 2007, 2008, we have more families more desperately in need that we are not addressing. And I guess I just want to know, how incremental can you be to solve that gap? What is going to be the turning point that says this incremental increase will end up causing more kids to be behind by the time they start third grade? And what are you going to do about it?
Well, you know, the problem is so comprehensive. When you think about children that get into school and by the third grade can't read, the predictability of them dropping out, even before high school, is a very sad statistic. So, you know, we're looking at the whole issue.
But we know that the language stimulation between 0 and 3 is a critical step to be able to read. The same part of the brain that learns how to read learns how to speak. We know that when efforts are made to improve that communicative ability between 0 and 3, that we're more likely to get kids ready to be able to do those things in formal education. Yet, I don't see the investment that matches up with what we already know about brain development.
Well,
I agree with the doctor. You know, the amount that we need is huge, and there has been some from the legislature put in, but that's not even getting us back to where we were before the recession. That's been admitted here. So I think now we have to say is, where is the source of other money? Because the tax base is not supporting that. The Secretary of Tax and Revenue is saying taxes are down, corporate tax is down. And here we have this fund, the Land Grant Permanent Fund, which will not raise 1 penny in taxes. It will double by 2031 if we take 1.5%. The constitutional amendment asked for money for non-school age children. 66% of the voters support this, 80% of women.
What about the possibility that you would explore Medicaid as a funding source for home visitation? because that's ready. That's right there. It's virtually untapped currently, and a lot of states are doing that. And then the other one that you had asked earlier that we never did get is the Children's Cabinet still in existence? Because that ought to be providing, I would think, the leadership for finding, if we're not going to tap the land grant fund, and the administration still remains opposed to it, as I understand it, then how are we going to find that 277 or 300 million?
So the Children's Cabinet is still meeting. Governor Martinez is actually the chair, and Secretary Dinas, who's the secretary at the Children, Youth, and Families Department, is the vice chair. There's quite a few agencies that are represented. So the Public Education Department has a seat at the table, Department of Health, HSD, but we also have agencies like corrections. Oftentimes we find youth who are incarcerated, and there is an impact for them educationally.
Do they have a regular public meeting schedule? I mean, I can't find anything on their website about
So the Children's Cabinet, the cabinet secretaries do meet regularly. The 4 areas that they are particularly interested in that they do annual reporting on are early childhood development, health and nutrition, educational outcomes with a specific focus on pre-kindergarten through grade 3, and then child welfare and public safety.
When did they meet last?
I was not at the last meeting. Secretary Scandera went, so I did not go. I believe their last meeting where the secretaries came together with the governor was earlier in the summer. I want to say July or August.
Well, I think they used to have a dedicated staff person. Is that still true?
So I can tell you from the Public Education Department side, the secretary is the member of the Children's Cabinet, and then our policy director is the dedicated staff member for PED that anytime we need to provide data or information or participate in a meeting, if the secretary can't be there, our policy director is the permanent staff member who's dedicated from our agency.
But
and I think most agencies have a similar structure.
There's clearly an impetus to do more for early childhood. So I haven't seen at the legislature or in reports from the Children's Cabinet kind of taking that banner. And that seems to be, for instance, Kay Johnson, who did this report for the Department of Health, is urging that the Children's Cabinet take this leadership role. She's saying there needs to be a leader to shepherd all these many efforts. Do you see that happening with the Children's Cabinet?
So I think there's a number of ways that that's happening. I think you can look at the work that's being done right now across PED, CYFD, and the Department of Health through our Race to the Top grant.
And what is the Race to the Top
The Race
grant?
to the Top is an early learning challenge grant that New Mexico received 2 years ago. We received $37.5 million to help develop our infrastructure so we have, as Senator Sapien spoke about, that braided system of systems. So from prenatal through early childhood, and our grant goes through grade 3. We have that aligned infrastructure so students have support every step of the way. I think that's a great example of how 3 key agencies on the Children's Cabinet are starting to take that leadership role.
I think right now about 10,000 students are getting pre-K. I mean, I think the goal is for universal, right?
Actually, Megan, the
impression.
legislation that was passed in 2005, the pre-K statute, actually defined pre-K as being voluntary. So it was never designed to be universal. And what we found is that year over year, we have had more interest from parents who want to put their children into state-funded pre-K. As Senator Sapien mentioned, there has been an increase in that targeted investment, and because of that, we've been able to meet the growing demand we've seen every year. I think part of why the New Mexico pre-K program is so successful is because we took time to make sure the infrastructure is there. Everything from the physical space you might need in an elementary school to providing side-by-side support for teachers. That's not something that all communities are necessarily ready for now, but it's something we've been able to bridge them into as we've grown the program.
Are you seeking an increase for pre-K programs?
We will be seeking an increase. I don't know our final number because we're still working on the budget with the executive.
As a medical provider, we'll commit to funding that at a higher level as well.
But only 1 out of 4 gets pre-K. Only 1 out of 4 in our state gets pre-K. But there's another group taking the banner on. There's another group that we don't talk about, which is more important because we could talk here till we grow donkey ears. There's another group out there, and that's the public. They're seeing us talk in circles and circles, and they've spoken. They recognize we have a problem. They're experiencing the problem. They're living the problem. And a very important poll, I keep going back to this, is the land grant fund. 66% of the people want us to go down this road. We love our democracy. Why not just let them vote? Why do we have a handful
What are your
of
concerns, Senator Sapien? I know you're concerned about this.
At the end of the day, though, and you mentioned it earlier, you have an expert that said that option, it's an option, and I think Haley had a great point on the earlier session, is it's Alan's option, and it's an option. We throw out 1%, we throw out that they will remain robust. There's an actuarial study that was done by a third-party financial firm that looked at just the dollars and cents and said that it would be detrimental to the fund. You add that 1.25% that advocates want out of the permanent fund, and you're talking about now over 6%, almost 7% out of the fund. Even foundations like St. Joseph's doesn't allow for more than 5%
That's
to come
not
out
true.
of their corpus.
Half of the stuff you're saying there, Senator, is not
until
true.
about 6 months ago, it
They don't
was,
take
Alan,
5.5 out of the fund. Because you use a rolling year average, a 5-year rolling year average, you're only taking 4.4% out of the fund. You don't tell the people that. That's misleading. We only take 4.4 out, and yet they give the numbers of the income per annual.
Of course, you know, the other issue is if you take a look at our other wonderful permanent fund, the Severance Tax Permanent Fund, and these funds supply approaching $700 million to public education. But that fund, the Severance Tax Permanent Fund, has been usurped so many times now. Every cause is an important cause. Water infrastructure, all the different things that we are looking for. And they predict that very shortly, the corpus, which is the money that is permanent in that fund, is going to start being usurped.
Well,
we don't.
And that's another fund. And that's another fund. But
And
this
so,
fund has only been asked 5 times in over 100 years. It's a 100-year-old fund. And we've only amended the Constitution 5 times.
There's 56,000 kids between 0 and 3.
And we're the poorest in the nation.
Funded by Medicaid. 56,000 kids right now, funded by Medicaid, who need some form of early childhood and support for learning. And my question is, how is that going to happen? I mean, $37.5 million from Race to the Top sounds like a lot of money. I personally, in my pediatric practice, have not had any kind of communication about what kids qualify for pre-K. So if those services are available, if the school stuff is available, it's not being communicated to primary care providers. And the infrastructure for prenatal care, where's that money going of that $37.5 million to support pregnant women? Because we're not seeing it on the health side.
You know, I want to go back to the Children's Cabinet for a minute because there seems to be this great need for coordination across programs, so we're not duplicating. So we're all working on the same page. And I hear you saying it's meeting. It's just, I talk to a lot of people to prepare for the show who are all in this realm, and they should know. If anyone should be hearing from the Children's Cabinet, it's them. And they're telling me they don't know. They don't know what's going on. Do you think it can be a role that coordinates all these things more effectively?
I do believe so. And I think one of the things that we can glean and take from the report, the Johnson report, is a great starting point. They actually did present to the Children's Cabinet because we were so concerned that there were so many agencies that possibly were duplicating efforts. When I was looking through the report, I must say that a lot of the recommendations from a CYFD's perspective have absolutely been implemented.
Now, one of the things she recommended, though, was the exploration of the possibility of Medicaid financing home visitation. What's the status of that recommendation?
And Senator, I feel as though we would need to have the Health and Human Services Department here to answer those specific questions about the limitations and the possibilities that these options provide.
But I mean, is that under discussion in the Children's Cabinet? Is that one of the options to what Alan is proposing that we ought to think is coming down the line that we can anticipate?
We have not had that discussion, at least in the meetings that I have been at the Children's Cabinet. We have not explored that as an option at this point.
I did invite Human Services Department and the Department of Health to join us today, and they were not able to do so.
Coordination and making sure that agencies aren't duplicating, that's an important function for the Children's Cabinet. But equally important is filling the holes in what we are you're providing this, they're providing this, they're providing this, but there are people that are still falling through the cracks in that system. And so one of the ways of dealing with that was supposed to be the Children's Cabinet. So I hope they'll take a look at the possibility that the Medicaid resource, which now is incredibly robust and is providing the state with 100% federal funding for services that are provided to people that are newly eligible, that is a very viable alternative, I would think, to tapping the permanent fund. If we're not going to do that, we ought to do something else, because these services are drastically needed.
We have to assure that we have a quality system before we just dump money into it. And so there has to be a game plan.
You know, we're kind of at the end of our time, so I'm going to put each of you on the spot really quickly and say, what do we need to do now?
We need to assure that we have a quality system that we then methodically fund.
Okay.
You can't get quality without spending money on it. And if you wait until you have a quality system before you invest in it, you'll never have it.
Jerry, that's why you methodically fund it. You don't just dump the money in.
I think I'm a great believer in dumping money into programs that have been demonstrated as effective.
And that's why we're 49.
If it works
Jerry.
everywhere else, it ought to work here.
And the LFC has specialized professionals that audit each of these departments and give us very sound recommendations, of which we have been following really evidence-based programs that we can move into and use as much money as we can. We've put in over $200 million more dollars.
Do you favor tapping the land grant fund or looking for more funding through Medicaid?
They are now indicating that really there's a constitutional issue, that tapping into the permanent fund would have to go into Congress, and that it's not mentioned in our Constitution as the original plan for that use.
Megan, we need to let the people vote on this. They can vote on the constitutional amendment. If the people are wise enough to elect our legislators, they're wise enough to say how we're going to spend our money.
Jennifer, what do you think we need to do right now?
I think that we've started it as a state, and looking at the child well-being report that's come out the last 2 years, first being 50th, next being 49th. I don't think any of us are satisfied with being at the bottom of that list. I know that the agencies are, and I know that the governor's not, and I don't think anybody is. We need to start looking at what mechanisms we've put in place. We need to start seeing what's working, expand upon them, and I think that we have the ability with the policymakers of this state to look at the general fund to expand upon it and get us so that we are addressing child well-being more effectively.
Do you think tapping the land grant fund or using Medicaid to rapidly expand is a good idea?
No.
Okay.
I do not.
Okay.
I think that there are other solutions that we need to explore as a state.
You know, one thing we have to point out is that Medicaid is a very exciting source now, but in out years it goes back down to what is, I think, currently 75%.
No, it goes down to 90. That's the lowest it drops.
And then in out years, we don't really have a delineation in terms of what happens with a new Congress and so on. And that is the fear, because being able to be in Medicaid at this point and then getting into a financial crisis and having to change it is very detrimental.
Leanne, I'm putting you on the spot. What should we be doing now?
Well, as Jennifer said, I think we've already started the work that needed to be done. Under the Martinez administration and with the partnership of the legislature, year over year, we have increased funding and services for our youngest children, prenatal through third grade.
But we still a lot of need that's not being met.
As the PED, I have to make sure we mention that we are also focusing on kids in grades K through 3 to make sure they continue getting those supports as they move into the elementary years. To your point, Megan, and what Jennifer said is we're not satisfied. We don't think the work is done, but continuing to make targeted investments and really make sure we're targeting the kids most in need and programs that are ready to be successful, I think is the key to success in the long run.
I just want to contrast our approach, which is methodical, targeted, go slow, incremental, little by little, for kids, for children, with our approach to Tesla, which is 500 million, here you got it. The reason Tesla doesn't come, or companies like that don't come to New Mexico, is because we don't have a good workforce that's dependable. And then we say, well, we need to invest in the workforce, but we'll do that in these dibs and drabs, and maybe by 2045 we'll have a workforce. This is the most important issue facing the state, what's happening to our kids, and we're taking a very incremental, slow, futile approach to what's needed. And I think, you know, we're condemning ourselves to failure by this, when we have other proven programs that could tomorrow help all those kids that Andy's program and that all the other programs we've heard described here.
Of course, what we also need is high-paid jobs for these people as they are getting themselves educated and ready for the workforce. So,
well,
you know, that's the other side of the coin.
Chicken and egg. Yeah.
Since Bill loves being on TV, I'm giving him the last word because we're out of time. But I know you guys have connected all these things. So tell me why. Is it fair to connect those two things?
I think it's great that all of us here agree that early childhood is important. But, you know, show me the money. We've given away hundreds of millions of dollars in tax cuts to big corporations the last couple of years. We found that money. We gave it away.
So we had the political will for that.
We had the political will for that. We gave it away. We're last in job growth as a result. We got nothing for that. I hear about go slow, be accountable, prove that it works. At the rate we're going to take more than 20, maybe 30 years to provide universal, voluntary, high quality early childhood programs for all of our kids. To me, that's not acceptable. I don't want to risk or throw away another generation of our kids. We're last in child well-being. How bad does it have to get before we feel motivated and generate the political will? All of the economists say the return on investment is 10 to 15% a year. If we invest in early childhood, we've gotten all that money back before that child finishes middle school. For the rest of their lives, everything that they earn, all that return on investment, 10% a year, comes back to the state for the rest of their lives. We pay off the investment by the time they finish middle school.
I would love to keep talking. I hope you all will stay and talk a little bit, but we have to stop. Thank you all for coming and spending time talking about a really complicated issue and doing it in a very civil way. We need more civil dialogue in our society.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we got some great information today. I definitely want to go back and have a conversation with Jennifer and our teams at both PED and CYFD and share what we learned. I do think there was some information shared today that was based on some misconceptions, so we definitely also need to think about how we share information with parents and families about the services that are available so that they are able to take as much advantage of them as they can.
And the game plan is to continue at least a 30% bump up every year in early childhood. It's unprecedented. We've never made this type of dedication. And over the next few years, we'll be at another 200 million, 300 million. The system needs time to be able to absorb that money, that we're not just wasting it on lump sum, inefficient spending of the taxpayer dollar.
I think that tapping the land grant permanent fund is a knee-jerk reaction. Again, we need to look at the return on the investment that's already been made, establish the cohort, look at what's working, how we sustain with stable funding what's working, and what we will need to expand the various programs that have already been implemented in the state of New Mexico.
Lots and lots of consequences down the line for us that are bad if we don't do something about this now. And then another generation, if they're parents themselves, then we'll have another generation facing some of these same disasters. So this is an opportunity to intervene early, save ourselves lots of trouble and lots of money down the line, and make an investment in kids.
Join us for Public Square every month, and visit our website by going to newmexicopbs.org and clicking on Local Productions. Here you can give us feedback or suggest topics. Also, look for us on Facebook and Twitter by searching for Public Square. Thank you for watching.